High above the mortal world, Mount Olympus stood under a sky that never stayed still, where silver clouds drifted around bright marble towers and golden halls glowed through constant thunder. The air there was thin, cold, and sacred, and every step along the shining paths felt like walking between worlds. Below those heights, the mortal world moved with sun, rain, and wind, while far beneath it, the underrealm waited in still shadows and deep silence. These three realms had always stayed separate, and that balance had kept all life in order. But now a forbidden frost was spreading through the stone bridges and sky roads between them, and if the frozen seal reached every path, Olympus would lose its voice, the mortal world would lose its sky, and the underrealm would lose its gates. Zeus, king of the gods and master of thunder, saw the danger first because he felt every crack in the heavens like a wound in his own hand. He was a strong man with bright white hair, a tall frame, and eyes like storm light, and he wanted to keep Olympus under his rule because he believed only his power could hold the realms together. Yet this crisis was larger than pride, larger than fear, and larger than any single god. The frost was not natural, and that truth made the danger far worse because if some hidden force could freeze the paths between worlds, then the very laws of heaven could collapse. Zeus knew he would need help even if he hated that fact. He stood on the highest terrace where the wind twisted around his blue and gold robe, and he watched a thin line of ice crawl across the air itself, inching toward the main bridge that linked Olympus to the mortal world. One wrong hour and the bridge would close forever. One more night and no prayer, no storm, and no gatekeeper would be able to cross between the realms again. Zeus gathered the gods in the Hall of Lightning, a wide chamber of polished stone where the ceiling opened to the sky and thunder rolled like a warning drum. Hera came first, queen of the gods, a woman with long black hair, a calm face, and a sharp gaze that never missed weakness. She wanted order, respect, and a world where power had rules, and she mattered because she could speak with the force of law when Zeus only spoke with force. Then came Athena, a woman with brown hair tied back, clear eyes, and armor that shone like a blade under moonlight. She wanted wisdom to guide action, and she mattered because she could see traps before others walked into them. Hades arrived last from the lower gate, a man with dark black hair, a pale cloak, and a quiet voice that carried deep weight. He wanted the underrealm left in peace, because every disturbance in the upper world always reached his domain in the end, and he mattered because the sealed paths would trap his realm in cold darkness if no one acted. Zeus called them together and told them the truth. The frost was moving through the realm roads by design, not by accident. It was locking every passage to build a prison of silence around the three worlds. Hera believed the answer was to seal Olympus tighter. Hades believed the underrealm should be left out of the fight. Athena believed the frost had a pattern and that someone had learned how the old gates worked. Zeus rejected their caution at first because he still wanted to act alone, but then a lesser messenger god rushed into the hall with frozen wings and shaking hands. He reported that one sky bridge had already gone white and still, and that mortal prayers were fading in places where the frost had touched the clouds. That was the turning point. Zeus could no longer pretend this was only a palace problem. The balance of every realm was already breaking, so he gave a hard order. The rival gods would unite, whether they liked it or not, and they would find the source of the forbidden frost before the heavens fell silent forever. They followed the frozen trail through the upper clouds where lightning flashed behind sheets of cold mist and the air itself seemed to harden around them. Athena studied the pattern of the frost and found that it spread in circles, not lines, which meant it was gathering power from one hidden place. Hades sensed a pressure rising from below as if the underrealm were breathing against a locked door. Hera noticed something even worse. The frost did not simply block the paths, it was feeding on conflict. Every argument among the gods made it grow faster, as if the curse itself wanted division. That revelation changed the hunt because the enemy was not only sealing roads, but also turning the gods against one another. Zeus tried to deny that warning, and his pride almost ruined the search. He wanted to break the frost with a single bolt and prove that his strength was enough. But when he hurled thunder into the sealed sky, the strike shattered against the ice and only made the cold brighter. The frost around the cloud rings above Mount Olympus then cracked open, and a colossal shape shifted inside the storm. It was a celestial dragon, vast as a mountain range, with bright scale plates that glimmered like frozen stars and wings hidden inside the storm clouds. It had been sleeping in the cloud rings for ages, guarded by the old balance of the realms, but the forbidden frost had awakened it early and twisted its nature. This dragon did not rage from hunger or hate. It fought because the frost had trapped its ancient instinct and pushed it into a panic, and if it spread its storm fully, the clouds around Olympus would shatter into endless ice. Zeus understood at last that the dragon was not the true enemy. It was the final test and also the final danger. To restore balance, the gods would have to face the creature, calm its storm, and break the frost at its source. If they failed, the mortal world would lose its sky, the underrealm would lose its gates, and Olympus would become a frozen throne with no living voice. The battle began when the celestial dragon rose from the cloud rings and struck the sky open with a roar that shook every temple on Olympus. Wind exploded in all directions, thunder split across the marble steps, and the cold frost rushed behind the creature like a living chain. Zeus led the charge, but this time he did not fight alone. Hera held the storm lines steady with waves of golden command, forcing the wind to bend instead of break. Athena directed each move with calm speed, calling out where the dragon would turn before it moved. Hades opened a shadow gate beneath the storm, not to attack, but to pull the frost away from the lower roots so the underrealm would not freeze shut. Zeus saw the pattern at last. The dragon was not the source of the frost. It was the key, because the frost was wrapped around its heart like a seal. Someone had hidden a deeper force inside the cloud rings, and that force was using the dragon as a living lock. Zeus then made a choice that changed everything. Instead of trying to dominate the creature, he stepped into the storm and spoke to it in the language of thunder, not with anger, but with command and promise. He told the dragon that Olympus would not chain it again and that the realms would be protected, not ruled by fear. The dragon slowed, confused by a voice that did not challenge it. Then Athena found the hidden truth inside the frost. The seal had been placed there long ago by an unseen hand that feared the three realms would grow too close and disturb the old order. That secret hand had wanted silence because silence meant control. Zeus felt the full meaning of the revelation hit him. The danger was not only the dragon and not only the frost. It was the old habit of divine rulers who believed balance could be preserved by locking everyone apart. That belief had created this crisis, and Zeus had almost repeated it himself. So Zeus did the one thing no king of thunder had done before. He lowered his power instead of raising it. He gathered the storm into a single bright ring above his hands, then split that power into 3 parts, sending one to Hera for order, one to Athena for wisdom, and one to Hades for safe passage below. Together, the 3 gods formed a new circle around the dragon, and their united force weakened the forbidden frost enough for the seal to crack. The celestial dragon let out one final cry, not of rage, but of release, and its massive form folded into the clouds as the ice chains shattered and fell away like broken glass. The sky above Mount Olympus opened wide again, and the paths between the realms began to glow with life. Still, Zeus did not cheer. He looked at the clean line of light stretching toward the mortal world, and he understood that the work was not finished. The frost had been stopped, but the old fear that created it still existed in the minds of gods and rulers. Hera watched Zeus with new respect because he had finally listened. Hades gave a quiet nod because his realm would remain open and safe. Athena smiled only a little because she knew the next threat would not come from the storm, but from the memory of it. Zeus then stood at the edge of the restored bridge and felt something change inside himself. He was still king and still strong, but he was no longer certain that strength alone made a ruler worthy of the heavens. He now understood that a true king protects every realm, even the ones that do not bow to him. That lesson came at a high cost, because the clouds still carried a faint crack of frost far in the distance, and somewhere beyond the broken storm, the real hand behind the seal was still watching. Zeus turned toward the dark horizon, thunder gathering again above his head, ready for whatever would come next, because the first battle for the balance of the realms had ended, but the larger war had only begun. The storm over Olympus did not calm after the first battle. It only changed shape, growing quieter in some places and darker in others, while the cloud rings above the mountain kept turning like slow wheels of iron and mist. Lightning flashed inside them with cold silver light, and every flash showed the same bad sign, the faint crack of frost still crawling through the clouds far away. Zeus stood in the hall of lightning with his bright white hair lifting in the wind from the open ceiling, his blue eyes fixed on the dark horizon, and his gold and white robe blazing with thin lines of thunder. He had won the fight, but he did not feel like a victor. He felt the weight of a king who now understood too much. Hera stood near the center of the hall, tall and calm, her long black hair smooth against her white and gold gown, her silver earrings shining each time lightning touched the marble. She watched Zeus with a severe face because she had seen his choice, and she knew the choice had changed him. Athena stood beside a golden column, her brown hair tied back tightly, her bronze armor catching every sharp beam of light, her gray eyes scanning the room with the careful focus of a soldier and a scholar. Hades remained near the shadowed edge, dark black hair falling around his pale face, his long cloak still as a hanging night cloud. And then the messenger god rushed in, a young man with light brown hair, frozen feathers clinging to his silver winglets, his pale blue tunic torn at the sleeve and fear written on every step. He was the first to speak because fear made him fast, and what he brought would force all the gods to move again. He said the frost had returned at the outer bridges, and it was not spreading like weather, it was spreading like a decision. The curse was aiming for the roads between realms, the gates, and every place where one world could touch another. If the frost reached the main paths, trade would stop, messages would fail, and small realms that depended on Olympus for protection would be cut off and left to freeze alone. Zeus understood the danger at once. This was not only an attack on his mountain, it was an attack on the promise he had just made. Hera folded her hands and spoke with quiet strength, saying that someone wanted the gods to panic and strike first, because panic always made kings easy to guide. Athena added that the pattern of the frost matched the old rules of divine binding, which meant the curse was not random. It had a mind behind it. Hades lifted his gaze and spoke in a low voice that made the hall feel colder, saying that the mind was still nearby, watching through the storm, waiting to see which god would make the first mistake. Zeus looked from one face to another, and the truth settled on him like a heavy crown. His enemy did not simply want to destroy bridges. His enemy wanted to make the gods abandon the weaker realms, so those realms would blame Olympus, and then war would begin across all the heavens. That enemy did not care about pride or honor. That enemy wanted control through fear, and the frost was only the tool. The messenger god bowed his head and admitted that he had also seen something else while flying back. Deep within the outer cloud rings, there had been a shape far too large to be a cloud and far too alive to be stone. It had moved once, slowly, with a light that looked like stars trapped under ice. Athena stiffened first because she already knew the old stories. She said the celestial dragon was real, a guardian creature tied to the deepest storm layers, and it nested inside the cloud rings where ordinary eyes could not easily look. If the dragon had awakened, then something had disturbed its rest, and if the frost had reached it, then the enemy had found a way to use the dragon or frighten it into attack. Hera turned her face toward Zeus and said the next step mattered more than the last battle. If he rushed out with anger, he could drive the dragon deeper into fear. If he hesitated too long, the frost would spread past the gates. Zeus listened, and for once he did not answer at once. He thought about the realms below. He thought about places that had never bowed to him and still deserved protection. He thought about the cost of being a true king. Then he gave a simple order. Athena would study the frost pattern and trace its source. Hera would keep the courts calm and make sure no realm heard false rumors before the truth was ready. Hades would watch the shadow roots beneath the clouds where hidden paths could be used by whoever had planted the curse. The messenger god would fly warnings to every border gate that still held, and Zeus himself would go to the cloud rings. He would face the dragon not as a conqueror but as a protector. The hall grew silent after that because everyone understood the risk. The cloud rings were not just high in the sky. They were a place where storms could eat sound, where lightning could blind, and where one wrong step could send a god spinning through endless air. Still, Zeus left the hall without fear showing on his face. His posture remained straight, stern, and commanding, but inside him something had changed. He was not chasing glory now, he was chasing balance. The path to the cloud rings opened through a storm gate above Olympus, and as Zeus rose through the air, thunder forming around his shoulders, the world below shrank into shining marble and gold. The clouds became thicker with each step, turning from gray to black to a deep silver haze that swallowed distance. Athena watched him go from the hall doorway, then lowered her eyes to a sheet of frost on the stone floor, where tiny crystal lines had formed a hidden pattern. That pattern was not random at all. It pointed inward, toward Olympus itself. Someone had already touched the heart of the mountain. Back in the upper sky, Zeus reached the first ring of storm clouds and found the air heavy with cold. The frost crawled over the cloud walls in pale blue veins, and every vein pulsed once as if it were breathing. Then the shape from the messenger god original warning rose out of the mist. The celestial dragon emerged in full, enormous and terrifying, with glowing star-like scales, icy white and blue highlights, and wings that stretched so wide they vanished into the thunder around it. Its body was built of cloud and lightning energy, and its eyes burned with ancient strength and deep fear. It did not attack at once. It circled Zeus instead, letting out a low sound that shook the storm. Zeus held his ground, though the wind pushed hard against him. He raised one hand, and lightning gathered above his palm, but he did not throw it. He spoke in a voice that carried through the clouds, telling the dragon that he had come to defend the roads, not chain another guardian. The dragon answered with a burst of frost that split the air and forced Zeus back a few steps, not as a strike of rage, but as a warning. Then the true twist of the night revealed itself. The frost on the dragon was not natural, and the creature was not the enemy. It had been sealed in place by a hidden command deep inside Olympus, and that command had been tied to the old throne chamber long before Zeus had felt the first crack in the sky. Athena, still below, realized the same thing at the same moment by matching the pattern of frost to records kept in the Hall of Lightning. Someone inside the divine order had set the curse, not just to attack the realms, but to make the celestial dragon look like the danger so the gods would destroy their own guardian. Zeus saw the truth in the dragon's eyes, and his anger shifted into shame. The dragon was fighting the curse, not serving it. It had been trapped between duty and fear, forced to protect the storm roads while frozen from the inside. That meant the real enemy was closer than anyone had thought. Hades felt it first in the shadow roots and sent a dark warning through the sky. A false ally had used old authority to hide the seal, and that ally was now moving again. Hera, hearing the report in the hall, narrowed her eyes in cold understanding. The Watcher beyond the storm was not only watching. The Watcher had influence, access, and reason. The Watcher feared a united Olympus, because a united Olympus would expose old lies and old greed. Zeus lowered his hand. Then, instead of striking, he took one step closer to the dragon and let his lightning soften into a bright blue shield. He called to it again, this time with respect, and he promised that no one would use it as a weapon. The dragon hesitated. Then the frost on its chest cracked, and a smaller pulse of warm storm light returned under the ice. That was enough for Zeus to understand how to begin. He had to break the hidden command without shattering the guardian, and he had to do it before the mystery hand behind the seal found a new way to move. As the dragon slowly turned its head toward the dark gap in the clouds, Zeus followed its gaze and saw a distant shape vanish into the upper storm line. He did not know the name yet, but he knew the enemy was still there. He also knew the next battle would not be won by strength alone. It would need trust, careful choices, and the courage to defend what pride would rather abandon. Far below, the Hall of Lightning flashed once more, and Athena began tracing the hidden root of the curse while Hera prepared the courts for the truth. The larger war had not started with a roar. It had started with a lie, and now Zeus was standing at the edge of the lie, ready to follow it into the dark, because the balance of the realms depended on what he chose next, and the storm was already waiting for part 3. The air above Mount Olympus had turned heavy and cold, and the storm clouds outside the Hall of Lightning rolled like dark water across a black sky. Inside the great marble chamber, golden columns stood in harsh flashes of blue light, and the open ceiling poured lightning into the room like broken spears of fire. Zeus stood near the edge of the hall, tall and rigid, his bright white hair shining under the storm, his glowing blue eyes fixed on the dark paths below. He was the king of the gods, but at that moment he looked less like a ruler and more like a man facing a choice that could break his world. The central problem was now clear to him and to everyone who mattered. A hidden lie had spread through Olympus, and if it was not exposed, the curse of forbidden frost would keep crawling across the bridges, the gates, and the cloud roads that held the realms together. If those paths failed, the worlds would lose their balance, and fear would become stronger than law. Hera stood across the hall, calm and severe, her long black hair falling over a white and gold gown, her silver earrings catching the lightning with each slow movement of her head. She had spent the last hour preparing the courts for the truth, because she knew that truth would hurt before it healed. Athena had already moved below, following the frost trail with sharp gray eyes and a mind that missed almost nothing. The battle had not started with swords or thunder. It had started with lie, and now every god in the hall could feel that lie tightening like a knot around the future of Olympus. A frightened rush of wings broke the silence, and the messenger god ran into the Hall of Lightning with frozen feathers clinging to his shoulders and heels. He was young, with light brown hair, a pale blue tunic, and wide eyes that kept darting toward the doors as if danger might follow him inside. He had no desire for glory, only for survival and the duty to carry warnings before disaster could grow. He bowed low, then lifted a trembling hand toward Zeus. "My lord," he said, his voice tight with fear, "the cloud roads near the outer rings are freezing faster than before, and the frost is not stopping at the gates." Zeus turned at once, and for a moment the hall seemed smaller, as if the storm itself leaned closer to listen. The messenger god explained that the frost was not normal ice. It spread in pale blue crystal lines, glowing faintly with unnatural cold, and each line weakened the stone and cloud beneath it. Hera closed her eyes for one brief moment, then opened them with a harder look. She already knew the curse was being guided, not born by accident. She had seen too much in the courts to trust sudden trouble. Athena had told her the frost moved with purpose, always turning away from ordinary defenses and heading toward places of old secret power. That meant someone understood the realm roots and wanted them broken in a very specific order. Zeus understood the threat at once. The curse did not need to destroy Olympus all at once. It only had to cut the right paths and isolate the right places until panic did the rest. That was why the hidden lie mattered so much. Someone had used fear and pride together, knowing the gods would argue while the frost spread. Far below, in the cloud layers that circled Mount Olympus, Athena moved with careful steps along a broken bridge of storm mist. She was a serious woman with brown hair tied back tightly, bronze armor shining under the weak lightning, and a dark cloak that snapped behind her in the wind. She was not the loudest of the gods, but she was often the most dangerous to deceive, because she asked the right questions and never stopped until the answers fit. She knelt near the edge of a cloud road where forbidden frost had crawled over the surface like pale glass veins. The cold shimmered against her armor, and she studied the pattern with a focused stare. The frost had a rhythm. It touched one point, then leaped to another, leaving gaps on purpose. Athena traced those gaps with one finger, and her eyes narrowed as the shape became clear. The curse was following the old nesting roots of the celestial dragon, moving through the hidden storm rings above Olympus. That was no accident. The dragon was not just a beast, but a living force tied to the balance of sky and storm, and whoever commanded or feared it understood that if the dragon was driven into panic, the entire upper world could shake. Athena had spent years learning where truth was buried, and now she realized the hidden lie was tied to the dragon nest itself. Someone had not only spread the frost, someone had also hidden the reason why. Then the sky above the cloud rings split with a low, rolling sound, and the celestial dragon rose out of the storm like a living mountain. Its scales glowed like stars, blue and white light moving across its immense body, and its great wings stayed half hidden in the clouds as if the sky itself was trying to conceal its full size. It was terrifying but also majestic, and even Athena held still when it turned its glowing gaze toward her. The dragon did not attack, it was afraid. That was the first twist, and it changed everything. The dragon had been blamed for the spreading frost, yet the frost was not its doing. The creature backed away from the frozen trail, and the storm around it quivered as if it remembered pain. Athena saw the truth at once. The dragon had been used as a shield for someone else. It had been made to look like the source of the curse so that the real hand behind it could work in secret. The hidden liar had wanted Olympus to blame a monster instead of asking who had opened the path for the frost. Athena reached for the hilt at her side, not to strike but to signal. "Do not run," she said softly, because even a giant creature could understand honest fear. The dragon lowered its head, and for a second its star-bright eyes looked almost young. It wanted to protect the upper clouds, not ruin them. It had been guarding the nesting place in the storm rings for reasons that were never explained to the court, and now those reasons were beginning to matter more than anyone had guessed. Back in the Hall of Lightning, Hera had assembled the first voices of the courts. She stood straight and calm, her queenly presence filling the marble chamber as the lightning flashed behind her. She had not called them there to ask permission. She had called them there to force the truth into the open, because a lie grows stronger in quiet rooms. Zeus watched her with a stern face, then turned as Hades entered from the shadowed side of the hall. Hades was a quiet man with dark black hair, pale skin, and a long shadowy cloak that seemed to absorb the storm light. His voice was low, and his eyes carried the weight of deep places no one else could see. He did not often step into disputes, but when he did, everyone listened. He had come because the balance of the realms mattered to him as much as it did to Zeus, though he showed it in a colder way. Hades told them that the roots beneath Olympus were also reacting to the frost, and that the lower passages were beginning to lock shut. If the roots collapsed in the wrong order, the realms would not simply become isolated. They would become suspicious of one another, and then fear would spread faster than any curse. Hera nodded once because this matched what she had feared. The lie was never only about one path or one beast. It was a larger plan to make every realm think another realm was to blame. That kind of fear could start a war without a single true attack. Zeus listened in silence, and the stern storm in his face deepened, because now the shape of the enemy was becoming clearer. Someone wanted the gods divided, and they wanted the divide to feel natural. The messenger god returned with another report, even more shaken than before. He had seen a figure moving through the edge of the cloud rings, using the frost as cover, and he had heard the same name spoken by frightened guards in the outer halls. That name was Vance. He was one of the older court attendants, a man with silver hair, a polished robe, and a smile that had always seemed too smooth to be trusted. He had spent years around the gates, the records, and the storm routes, always asking careful questions that made him look useful and harmless. Zeus had never liked him, but pride had often made Zeus ignore quiet warning signs from lesser voices. Now the truth snapped into place. Vance had not been acting alone. He had used the courts to spread doubt, then used the fear of the celestial dragon to hide the real purpose of the frost. He had wanted the dragon blamed so the courts would seal the nesting roots, which would trap the storm paths in broken patterns. If those patterns broke fully, the outer realms would lose their safe crossings, and the gods would be forced into conflict over shrinking power and control. The motive was simple, and that made it worse. Vance believed order only came through fear, and he believed he could rule the fear after everyone else had been weakened by it. Zeus looked toward Hera, then toward Athena below, then toward Hades in the shadows, and for the first time in a long time he stopped trying to be the only one who could carry the weight. He understood that pride had blinded him before because he had wanted to solve everything alone. That pride had given the lie room to grow. Now he would not make that mistake again. At the edge of the hall, the storm sky flashed brighter, and a cold wave ran through the marble floor as if the curse itself had heard its name. Athena's voice came through the celestial link of the courts, calm but urgent, and she said that the dragon was not the enemy but the key. The frost trail led not just to the nesting place but to a hidden chamber inside the cloud rings where something had been sealed long ago. Zeus felt the meaning strike him hard. The lie may have begun because Vance feared that sealed thing would expose his own theft or his own bargain, or both. Hera turned her head toward Zeus, and in her severe face there was no softness, only trust earned through struggle. "You must go," she said, "not as a ruler who demands obedience, but as the one who chooses truth." Zeus closed his hand, and the lightning in the hall answered him with a low growl. He was still stern, still powerful, still the storm itself, but now there was something different inside his eyes. He was beginning to understand that strength without trust becomes a cage. He took one slow step forward, then another, ready to follow the curse into the dark cloud rings above Olympus, where the dragon waited, where Athena had found the trail, and where the first real answer to the lie was still hidden. Behind him, the Hall of Lightning glowed in hard white flashes, and ahead of him, the storm opened like a door that had been waiting for his choice. The war had not yet fully broken loose, but it was now close enough to touch, and the next moment would decide whether Olympus stood together or fell apart. Zeus lifted his chin and moved toward the storm, while the others prepared to follow, and the secret in the cloud rings held its breath for part 4. Zeus stepped into the storm with his shoulders squared and his bright white hair flashing in the wind, while the Hall of Lightning burned behind him in sharp white bursts. The marble floor trembled under his feet, and the open ceiling above him showed a sky that was no longer calm, but alive with rolling thunder. Hera stood a few steps back, her long black hair moving like a dark ribbon over her white and gold gown, her calm face hiding deep worry. Athena, with brown hair tied back and bronze armor shining under the lightning, watched the storm with the careful eyes of a warrior who trusted facts more than fear. Hades, quiet and pale beneath his shadowy cloak, said nothing at all, but his dark black hair and cold stare made it clear that he had seen secrets even worse than this one. And beside them, the messenger god rushed forward with frozen feathers clinging to his small silver wings, his light brown hair wet with mist, his frightened face telling everyone that something terrible had already begun. The problem was now simple to say, even if it was hard to fix. Forbidden frost was spreading across the cloud paths of Olympus, and if it reached the inner realms, it would seal off the roads between the gods and trap them in isolation. That would leave Olympus weak, divided, and easy to break. Zeus knew this, and he also knew something else. Someone inside the court had helped the frost spread, and if he chose the wrong person to trust, the whole mountain could fall into chaos. The storm opened wider as Zeus moved forward, and the others followed him onto the cloud path of Olympus, where pale blue cracks of frost had already started to crawl over the layered clouds. The path was meant to carry gods between the outer rings and the inner halls, but now it felt thin and fragile, like a bridge made of breath and lightning. The messenger god pointed ahead with a shaking hand and whispered that he had seen the frost appear after Vance passed through the outer gates. Vance was a court attendant with silver hair, a polished dark robe, and a smooth smile that never reached his eyes. He served the hall with perfect manners, and that was exactly why he mattered. He knew where every seal was kept, where every guard changed posts, and which words could make the worried more afraid. He had claimed that the celestial dragon hidden in the cloud rings was a threat that should be locked away forever, because he said no one could predict what a creature of storm and starlight might do when the realms were under pressure. But Athena had already noticed the flaw in that story. If Vance truly wanted only safety, then why had he also led Frost toward the hidden routes that connected the chamber to the wider sky? Hera did not speak yet, but her sharp silence told Zeus that she was weighing every side of the lie. Hades walked last, his cloak dragging shadow across the cloud road, and he said in a low voice that fear was often the easiest tool for a clever liar. Zeus heard him, and he did not answer because the storm ahead had already begun to answer for itself. Deep in the clouds, something huge shifted, and the glow of the hidden chamber flickered through the mist like a trapped heartbeat. When they reached the outer ring of the cloud walls, the hidden chamber revealed itself in a flash of lightning mist. Ancient sky wards lined the sealed door, and each ward shimmered with a weak, tired glow, as if they had been held shut for far too long. The chamber had not been built as a prison in the simple way Vance claimed. Athena traced the marks on the stone and realized the truth first. The chamber was a shelter, not a cage. Long ago, the gods had sealed it to protect the celestial dragon during a violent storm cycle that had nearly torn the sky apart. The dragon was not a mindless beast, but a guardian creature formed from cloud and lightning energy, with star-like scales and immense wings hidden in the storm. It had been placed here because its power was too great to roam freely during periods of unrest, and because the old gods feared that greedy hands might use it as a weapon. That was the real reason the chamber mattered. If the seal failed, the dragon would awaken under fear and pain, and if the seal stayed shut forever, the guardian would slowly weaken and the balance of the skies would suffer. Zeus felt the weight of that truth at once because it changed the whole shape of the crisis. The frost was not only blocking roads, it was attacking the old wards, and it had been guided there by someone who wanted the chamber opened or destroyed for a reason far more personal than safety. Vance stepped out of the mist then, calm as ever, his silver hair shining under the lightning. He told them that he had tried to warn the court, but no one listened. He said the dragon could break free and ruin Olympus, and that the only wise choice was to let the frost finish the seal so the danger would remain buried. His voice sounded gentle, but his eyes were hungry, and Zeus finally understood the shape of the trick. Vance did not want peace. He wanted control. If the dragon stayed hidden, he could keep everyone afraid. If the dragon was destroyed, he could claim he had saved Olympus. Either way, he would be praised, and the truth would never stand in his way. Athena moved first because she never waited when a lie had already been exposed. She stepped between Zeus and Vance, bronze armor catching the lightning, and she said that the chamber seal had been designed to protect both the dragon and Olympus. Hades added that the frost could not have spread by accident because its pattern followed the old ward lines with careful purpose. Hera then lifted her chin, and her queenly voice cut through the storm like a bell. She asked Vance why he had been near the seal markers at all, and why the messenger had seen him leave frost dust on the lower path. For the first time, Vance lost part of his calm smile. He answered by raising both hands and saying that everyone around him was too blind and too proud to see the coming disaster. He claimed that gods always hid their mistakes, and that he alone had the courage to stop the dragon before it could become a weapon in the wrong hands. But Zeus could hear the fear beneath those words. Vance had not been protecting Olympus. He had been protecting his own future. The more frightened the court became, the more they would follow the person who seemed most sure. That was his real motive, and it was ugly in its simplicity. He wanted power without earning trust. Before Zeus could speak, the chamber door shuddered. A crack of frost broke across one ancient ward, and from inside came a deep, living sound, part thunder and part cry, as if the celestial dragon had heard its name after a long silence. The storm around them suddenly answered with a violent flash, and the whole cloud ring shook as if something enormous had just turned in its sleep. Zeus felt the choice settle on his shoulders at last. If he forced the chamber open, he might face a guardian too wild to control. If he held back, Vance could keep spreading fear and let the frost finish the seal. He looked to Hera, to Athena, to Hades, and to the messenger god, and he saw the same hard truth in their faces. No one could solve this by hiding anymore. Yet just as Zeus raised his hand to break the frost line and reach the chamber seal, a second presence moved inside the storm, and the shadow it cast was far larger than Vance had promised. The hidden chamber was no longer the only thing waking up, and the next moment would decide whether the truth could still be saved. The Hall of Lightning still trembled under the open storm sky, and every gold column threw long shadows across the polished floor. Cold air moved in thin waves from the broken frost line, and the cloud roads beyond the chamber glowed with pale blue cracks. Zeus stood at the front with his bright white hair lifting in the wind, his glowing blue eyes fixed on the storm. Hera stood beside him in her white and gold gown, calm and severe, while Athena waited with her bronze armor bright under the lightning. Hades kept close in his dark cloak, silent and watchful, and the messenger god hovered behind them with frozen feathers on his silver wings. All of them could feel the same truth now. The hidden chamber was not the whole danger. Something else was waking up, and if they hesitated now, Olympus could lose control of the entire storm. Zeus lowered his hand only a little, then looked toward the shaking cloud rings above the outer wall. The second presence inside the storm pressed down like a huge hidden weight, and it moved with old anger and old pain. That was when Vance stepped out from the edge of the lightning mist, his silver hair smooth, his dark robe still neat, and his calm smile far too steady for a man standing so close to disaster. He had always served in the courts of Olympus with quiet manners and soft words, and that was why so few had noticed him. He wanted power, but not the loud kind that came from open war. He wanted control over the seals, the wards, and the hidden paths between the realms. He believed that the old gods had become too proud and too slow, and he thought the secrets under the cloud rings should belong to the one clever enough to use them. Now he lifted both hands and spoke as if he were still the one in charge. He said the frost was not a mistake, but a key, and the chamber was not a prison, but a lock on something that should have been found long ago. The messenger god stared at him in shock, because Vance had been the one person he had trusted to bring warning, not danger. Athena narrowed her eyes at once, because the shape of the spell matched every false path she had already traced. Hera did not move, but her face grew colder, because she understood that Vance had used the fear of a hidden threat to push everyone toward the chamber. Hades remained still, but his shadow deepened, because he could feel the storm around the outer rings answering Vance with a heavy, dangerous pulse. Then the cloud path of Olympus cracked again, and the forbidden frost raced farther along its surface like living glass. The pale blue curse spread from the broken seal and climbed the air in sharp lines, reaching toward the chamber door and the storm walls. Zeus stepped forward at once, and his body filled with lightning light as he raised one hand to hold back the frost. He did not strike first, because now he understood that a reckless blow could open the way for the hidden force behind the storm. Instead, he asked the one question that mattered. He demanded to know what Vance had truly awakened. Vance smiled again, but this time the smile was thin and tense, because even he could hear the sound coming from the cloud rings. It was not a roar, it was a low, deep call, like a giant breathing in its sleep. Vance finally admitted the part he had tried to hide. The hidden chamber was built to protect the realm from the celestial dragon, a creature of star-like scales and storm power that slept inside the cloud rings. Long ago, the dragon had not been locked away because it was evil. It had been sealed because the gods feared what would happen if anyone tried to use its power for selfish gain. The frost curse was never meant to free the dragon directly. It was meant to weaken the ancient wards, open the chamber, and lead the right person to the dragon before the others could stop him. Vance had planned to bind that power to himself, then use it to bend Olympus and the cloud roads to his will. He wanted the storm throne, not the throne of a king in name, but the true control behind every gate, every road, and every realm crossing. That truth hit harder than any lightning strike. Hera turned sharply toward Zeus, and in her severe voice she ordered him to think before the storm answered. Athena moved closer to the broken seal, her eyes fast and exact, and she saw the next part of the trap hidden in plain sight. The frost was not only spreading outward, it was forming a path. The cracks curved toward the hidden chamber, then bent upward toward the cloud rings, as if some hidden force was guiding the cold from inside. Hades finally spoke in a low, measured voice, and he said the chamber was only one lock in a larger chain. If it opened the wrong way, the chain would pull on the dragon, the storm wards, and the realm gates at once. The messenger god, still frightened, told them he had seen Vance near the outer rings long before the first frost appeared. He had thought Vance was checking supply routes and message paths, but now he understood the real reason. Vance had been mapping the weak points of the cloud roads for weeks. He had used his quiet role to move between the halls, learn the patrol cycles, and prepare for this moment when everyone would be looking at the wrong door. Zeus listened, and for the first time since the storm began, he did not rush forward with anger. He saw the full shape of the danger, and he saw his own mistake too. He had trusted the lightning in the sky, but not the quiet hands in the hall. He had thought the strongest enemy would arrive with force, yet Vance had come with patience, lies, and careful planning. That was the real twist, and it changed everything. Vance was not simply trying to steal power from Olympus. He had been building a path to wake the celestial dragon while making the gods believe the threat was only the frost. He had wanted them divided, busy, and late. But now the lie was broken, and the second presence in the storm grew louder because it had finally been noticed. Far above them, the cloud rings shifted in a wide circle, and a shape moved behind the storm veil, too large to be hidden for long. Its glowing star-like scales flashed once through the dark, and the entire chamber felt that glance like a warning. The celestial dragon was awake enough to hear them now. Whether it would rise as a guardian or a disaster depended on what happened next. Athena stepped to Zeus and told him the only clear path. They could not break the chamber seal by force because that would shatter the chain and free the wrong power at the wrong time. They had to restore the storm wards, stop the frost at its source, and force Vance to expose the final part of his plan. Hera agreed at once, and her queenly calm hardened into command. She ordered the messenger god to fly the warning to every inner gate because the cloud roads would fail first if the frost kept spreading. The young messenger nodded with wide eyes and launched into the storm, his silver wings scattering frozen feathers behind him. Hades moved to the side of the chamber and pressed one hand to the stone, feeling the deep quiet under the floor. He sensed old seals, old fear, and a path hidden beneath the chamber that Vance had not fully understood. Then Zeus turned to Vance, and his stern face lit with rising lightning. He told Vance that greed had brought him to the edge of ruin, but it would not make him the master of Olympus. Vance did not answer with fear. He answered with a sudden, sharp gesture, and the frost exploded across the floor in a bright wave. For one breathless moment, the hall of lightning vanished under cold light, the columns blurred in the glare, and the broken seal shuddered like a heart about to split. Then the storm above roared back, and the hidden chamber answered from deep inside the cloud rings. The second presence pushed against the wards with a force so heavy that even Vance lost his calm smile. Zeus spread his arms and called the lightning into a shield, while Hera held her ground beside him, and Athena drew her bronze strength into a tight defensive line. Hades stood like a shadow at the edge of the light, ready to catch any opening that came from below. Somewhere beyond the chamber, the celestial dragon turned in its sleep, and the whole sky seemed to hold its breath. The frost still crawled, the seal still trembled, and Vance still stood between them and the truth he had tried to claim. But now the others understood the real shape of the battle. This was no longer only about a hidden room or a stolen secret. It was about who would speak to the dragon first, who would control the storm path, and whether Olympus would be saved by trust before greed could finish what it started. Zeus took one step forward, and the lightning around his hand grew brighter as the next move of the storm began to form. The hall of lightning still shook with each deep roll of thunder, and bright flashes moved across the marble floor like living fire. High above, the open ceiling showed the storm sky above Olympus, where dark clouds spun around the golden peaks and hid the dangerous cloud rings. The cold from the forbidden frost had already reached the lower paths, and pale blue cracks glowed along the cloud path of Olympus like warning lines drawn by a patient enemy. Zeus stood at the center of the hall, tall and stern, with bright white hair and glowing blue eyes locked on Vance. Hera stood near him, calm but severe, with long black hair falling over her white and gold gown. Athena watched from the side in polished bronze armor, her brown hair tied back, her sharp gray eyes moving over every detail. Hades remained farther back in his dark cloak, quiet and still, while the messenger god hovered near the doorway, his light brown hair damp with fear and silver wings frozen at the edges. All of them now understood the same hard truth. If the wrong voice reached the celestial dragon first, Olympus could lose its storm path, lose its hidden balance, and sink into endless cold under Vance's never-trusted smile. Vance kept his hands open and his face smooth, as if he still believed he could talk his way out of the storm. He had silver hair, a polished dark robe with storm patterns, and the calm smile of a man who liked to hide hunger behind respect. He had not come here only to steal a secret. He wanted the dragon because he believed fear was a better tool than trust, and he believed the sky would obey whoever held the loudest threat. Long ago, he had learned about the hidden chamber inside the cloud rings, where the celestial dragons slept inside lightning mist and ancient sky wards. He also learned that the forbidden frost was not just ice. It was a curse built to spread through bridges and cloud roads, freezing the links between realms so no one could move freely unless he allowed it. Vance had planned to use the curse, cut the storm path apart, and then step in as the only one who could guide the dragon through the cold. That was why he had hidden the truth, blocked warnings, and tried to stand between the others and the chamber. He was not looking for safety. He was looking for control. Zeus took one more step forward, and the lightning around his hand grew brighter, but Hera lifted one hand and stopped him before he spoke. Her voice was calm, yet it carried the force of a queen who had seen too many lies become disasters. She reminded everyone that anger could not save Olympus if it made them careless. Athena nodded once because she knew Hera was right. Then Athena turned her sharp gray eyes to Vance and asked the question that cut deepest. She wanted to know why he had chosen this path when the Storm Kingdom had already given him honor, shelter, and rank. Vance finally let the smile fade, and for the first time his face showed real frustration. He said the others were blind. He said the dragon was too dangerous to be left to counsel and tradition. He said the old rules had turned Olympus weak because no one wanted to make the hard choice before the sky collapsed. But his words did not sound brave. They sounded like a man trying to dress greed as wisdom. Hades, quiet as shadow, then spoke in a low voice and said that fear always sounds smart when someone wants to rule alone. That one sentence made Vance flinch because Hades had found the center of his weakness. Vance wanted power, but he also feared being forgotten, and that fear had fed his hunger until it became a trap of its own making. Before anyone could move, the messenger god rushed in with a sharp cry, his small silver wings shaking with frozen feathers. He had been sent to check the outer routes, and now he brought bad news that made the hall feel even colder. The frost was spreading faster across the cloud path of Olympus. The cracks were not just widening, they were linking together into a hard pattern, and the path was starting to lose its light. If the frost reached the inner gates, the way to the hidden chamber would lock under crystal ice, and the dragon could wake in panic instead of peace. That mattered because the celestial dragon was not a beast to be captured. It was the guardian of the storm path, and its movement controlled the flow of lightning roads between the clouds. If it was frightened, the storm would lash out across Olympus. If it was calmed, the path could be healed. This was the real reason the battle mattered. Whoever spoke first would shape the dragon fear or trust, and that choice would decide whether the realm stayed whole. Zeus looked to Hera, then to Athena, then to Hades, and in that silent moment the others saw how much weight he was carrying. He had always looked like a ruler who could command the sky with a glance, but now he stood like a man forced to choose between force and wisdom. He said they would not chase Vance blindly because that was what Vance wanted. Instead, they would go to the hidden chamber together and they would face the dragon as one. Hera agreed at once because she understood that unity was their best shield. Athena agreed as well, and she began forming the plan with quick, clear words. She would lead the route through the storm cracks and watch for false turns. Hera would keep the group steady and make sure no one was split off by fear. Hades would move through the shadows around the cloud rings and check for any hidden traps or ward breaks. Zeus would open the way with lightning only when needed, so the storm would not wake too hard. Even the messenger god, despite his fear, offered to run warnings ahead of them. His role was small, but it mattered because speed might save them if the frost surged again. For the first time in this story, every god in the hall chose trust before pride, and that choice itself became a weapon. Vance watched them form the plan, and his calm smile returned, but now it looked thinner and more dangerous. He realized he was losing control of the room, so he made one last move. He said the dragon would never listen to a council that could not even agree on a path. Then he reached into his robe and pulled out a small shard of pale blue crystal, a piece of the forbidden frost that hummed with cold power. With a sharp flick of his wrist, he threw it at the nearest column, and the cold burst outward in a wave. Frost raced along the marble floor and climbed the base of the golden pillars. The hall dimmed as the temperature dropped, and the storm light above flickered hard enough to throw giant shadows across every face. For a brief second, chaos seemed close enough to win, but Athena moved first. She slammed her bronze shield against the floor and broke the spread long enough for Zeus to strike the crystal wave with a line of lightning. The frost shattered into glowing mist, and the hall filled with steam and sparks. Hades used the cover to step behind Vance, cutting off his retreat without a sound. Hera raised her hand, and her voice rang out like a command bell, telling Vance that his tricks were finished. Vance froze for a heartbeat, and in that heartbeat the others saw the real man beneath the smooth face. He was not a giant of destiny. He was a frightened person who had chosen control over honesty. That was the story hidden inside all his lies. Then the stone floor beneath the hall gave a deep tremor, and every eye lifted at once. From far beyond the ceiling, a sound rolled down through the clouds, low and huge and alive. The celestial dragon had noticed the fight. Its presence pressed against the storm sky, and the whole hall of lightning seemed to hold its breath. Zeus lowered his hand, not from fear but from respect, because he understood that a rushed first meeting could turn wonder into disaster. Athena motioned to the others to stay calm. Hera straightened her gown and lifted her chin, ready to face whatever came next. Hades turned his shadowed gaze toward the open ceiling, reading the storm like a map. The messenger god backed toward the door, ready to run the moment he was needed. Vance, trapped and shaken, looked toward the ceiling with a face full of panic because he had built all his plans around being first, and now he might be too late to matter at all. Above them, the cloud rings flashed with silver lightning, and the hidden chamber waited somewhere inside the storm mist, still sealed, still dangerous, and still holding the answer that could save Olympus or break it forever. Zeus took a slow breath, and the light around his hand steadied into a clear, bright glow. He was no longer reacting to Vance. He was choosing the path himself. Then he stepped toward the storm gate with Hera at his side, while the others moved to follow, and the next moment of the storm began to open like a door they could not see but all had to face together. Yet even as they moved, the dragon gave one long, distant cry, and that sound carried a warning that made every heart in the hall tighten at once, because something inside the hidden chamber had just awakened as well. The hall of lightning still shook with cold wind and sharp thunder, and the open ceiling showed a sky split by restless storm light. Golden columns stood in a bright line around the room, but pale frost had begun to crawl across the marble floor, and that made the great hall feel smaller and far less safe. Zeus walked at the front with his bright white hair lifting in the wind, his blue eyes steady, and his gold and white robe glowing with thin lightning patterns. Hera stayed close beside him, calm and severe, her long black hair falling over her white and gold gown, while Athena moved behind them with her brown hair tied back and her bronze armor ready for any sudden clash. Hades followed in silence, his dark black hair and shadowy cloak making him seem like a moving piece of night, and the messenger god rushed near the back with his light brown hair damp from storm mist, his small silver wings trembling with fear. They all understood the same terrible truth now, because the hidden chamber had awakened, the forbidden frost was spreading again, and if they failed here, the cloud roads of Olympus could freeze, split, and trap every realm above and below. Zeus did not look back at Vance anymore, because that choice had already been made in his heart. Vance stood near the edge of the hall in his polished dark robe, his silver hair neat, his smooth face calm, and his soft smile still trying to hide the greed under it. He had spent too long speaking in careful words, trying to make Zeus doubt himself, trying to make the others think that control was the same thing as safety. Now his plan was showing its true shape. He wanted the power sealed inside the hidden chamber, because he believed the celestial dragon could be forced into obedience, and he believed the storm gates could be used to lock Olympus under his rule. He was not brave and he was not loyal, he was patient, and that made him dangerous. Hera saw it clearly, and Athena saw it too, because wisdom notices the same lie from different angles. Zeus felt the anger of that truth, but he did not let it lead him now. The storm had already taught him enough. He stepped toward the opening in the wind, and the others followed because they now trusted the choice in his eyes more than the fear in Vance's voice. That was the first real change in him. He was no longer moving because someone pushed him. He was moving because he understood that leadership meant taking the first step when the sky itself seemed ready to break. The storm gate formed ahead of them as a tall, shifting doorway made of moving cloud and bright lightning veins, and the air around it hummed with a deep, strong force. Beyond it lay the cloud path of Olympus, a high road of layered cloud that stretched into the outer rings, and now pale blue cracks of forbidden frost ran along its surface like veins of cold light. The messenger god swallowed hard and spoke in a thin voice that still carried fear. He said that the last time the chamber opened, the storm wards had almost failed, and the dragon had cried out because it could feel the curse waking under the clouds. Athena answered him with a firm nod because she wanted the truth spoken plainly. She explained that the hidden chamber was not a treasure room, but a prison built long ago to hold a dangerous power tied to the dragon, a power that could either protect the sky or ruin it if handled by a greedy hand. Hades added that sealed things often grow worse when they are ignored, and his quiet voice made the warning feel even heavier. Hera then told Zeus that the chamber was hidden for a reason, and that reason mattered more than pride, because the old rulers of Olympus feared not the dragon itself, but the mind that might try to use it. Zeus listened without interrupting, and for once he did not answer with force. He simply held the thought in silence, and that silence showed growth because he was learning that strength was not only thunder and command. It was also the patience to understand what others had been afraid to say. They stepped onto the cloud path of Olympus, and the storm road felt alive under their feet. Lightning lines pulsed faintly beneath the cloud surface, and the forbidden frost made the path slick and bright in places, as if cold light had been poured into the air and left to harden there. The celestial dragon gave one long cry from somewhere inside the cloud rings, and the sound rolled through the sky like a warning bell. Its star-like scales flashed for a moment in the storm clouds above, and then the great wings were hidden again behind dark weather. That cry reached every one of them in a different way. The messenger god nearly froze in place, Athena raised her bronze shield higher, Hades narrowed his eyes toward the clouds, and Hera lifted her chin as if she were refusing to let fear touch her face. Zeus felt something new in that cry because it no longer sounded like simple threat. It sounded like pain, warning, and a plea all at once. Then the hidden chamber answered. A deep pulse shook the cloud rings, and a seam of blue light ran through the mist ahead. The air grew colder, and the frost spread in a fast wave along the road behind them, cutting off the safe path back to the hall. Vance saw that movement and smiled a little wider because he had wanted exactly this. He wanted them trapped between fear and the chamber with no easy turn left or right. He called out that the dragon was unstable and that the chamber must be sealed by force, but his voice carried too much satisfaction, and Athena heard that lie right away. She shouted back that he was too eager and that no honest protector smiled at disaster. Vance did not answer her directly. He only lifted one hand, and from the frost near his feet, a thin curtain of cold mist began to rise. The mist was not natural. It moved with intent, and that was the worst part. The forbidden frost spread faster, climbing the cloud road in pale blue branches, and every branch touched a stone or a wall it left behind a sharp chill that made the air sting. Hera moved first, her calm face tightening as she saw the path begin to close. She told Zeus that Vance had been feeding the curse with storm energy for days because he wanted the hidden chamber to open at the exact moment he could claim whatever was inside. That was the twist none of them had fully seen before. Vance had not been trying to stop the awakening. He had been guiding it. He had made the danger worse on purpose because the chaos would weaken the Watchers and force the others to depend on him. Zeus turned sharply toward Vance, and the blue glow in his eyes grew brighter, not with blind rage but with clear understanding. Vance answered with a smooth laugh and said that rules only matter when strong hands enforce them. He then admitted in the same soft voice that the dragon was never meant to stay free, because its power belonged to the throne of Olympus, and he would be the one to take it. That confession hit harder than any thunder strike because it showed the real shape of his motive. He did not want to save the sky, he wanted to own it. The Hall of Lightning suddenly felt far away, and the storm gate behind them trembled as if it were listening to the same truth. Zeus stepped forward again, but this time he was not driven by anger alone. He had seen the trap, understood the lie, and accepted that the storm would not be solved by force without thought. Hera moved beside him, one hand lifted as if guiding an unseen line in the air, and Athena took the other side with a warrior focus that made her look almost carved from bronze and resolve. Hades lifted his dark cloak slightly, and shadows gathered at his feet like quiet shields. The messenger god hovered near the rear with shaking wings, but even his fear had changed into purpose because he now knew that his message mattered. He pointed toward the seam of blue light ahead and said that the chamber was opening from the inside, which meant something inside it had answered the dragon cry. The ground of the cloud road shivered and a ring of ice cracked outward, but the crack stopped just before reaching Zeus. He raised his hand and lightning gathered there in a clean white line, then spread into the storm veins under the path. The cloud road answered him. It did not obey him like a servant, but it supported him like an ally. That mattered. It showed that Zeus was no longer trying to dominate the storm. He was learning how to move with it. Across the path, Vance backed toward the rising frost, his calm smile starting to fail for the first time because he had expected division and panic, not unity. The chamber light grew stronger, the dragon cried again, and the sealed door of the hidden chamber began to open wider, just enough for them to see a deep glow within. Whatever had awakened in there was now awake for all of them, and the next step would decide whether Olympus was saved, changed, or broken open forever. The Hall of Lightning shook under a sky of rolling storm clouds, and bright flashes kept pouring through the open ceiling like spears of white fire. Zeus stood at the front in his gold and white robe, his bright white hair lifted by the wind, his glowing blue eyes fixed on the narrow opening of the hidden chamber. Beside him, Hera held herself tall and calm, her long black hair falling over her white and gold gown, while Athena stood ready in bronze armor, her brown hair tied back and her sharp gray eyes scanning every crack of frost. Hades waited in silence, dark black hair falling near his pale face, his shadowy cloak barely moving, and the messenger god hovered close behind with his light brown hair trembling in the cold, his small silver wings shaking as frozen feathers clung to them. Across the cloud path of Olympus, Vance stood near the spreading forbidden frost, his silver hair shining under the storm light, his dark robe neat as ever, and his smooth face now strained by the first true fear he had shown. He had expected the gods to blame each other. He had expected Hera to distrust Zeus, Zeus to rush ahead, Athena to question every move, and Hades to stay apart. Instead, they stood together. That single fact made his plan begin to fail, because his greed depended on division, and unity was the one thing he had not prepared for. The deep glow inside the hidden chamber brightened again, and the sound that came from within was not a roar but a low cry of pain and warning. Athena stepped forward first because she always wanted the truth before the fight. She spoke in a clear voice and told the others that the frost was not normal ice, but a curse built to spread through sacred paths and weaken the old wards of Olympus. She had studied the ancient sky records for years, and she knew the forbidden frost did not simply freeze stone and cloud. It fed on doubt, fear, and broken trust. That was why Vance had been smiling so calmly before. He had never needed brute force. He had only needed the gods to turn on each other long enough for the curse to reach the chamber. Hera looked at Vance with a cold, steady gaze and said that he had been feeding secrets to the wrong ears for a long time. Vance lifted his hands in false innocence and said he only wanted the truth to come out, but his eyes moved toward the open chamber again and again. Zeus heard that lie for what it was because the storm in his chest told him the same thing. Vance did not want truth, he wanted control. He wanted whatever power slept inside the chamber to give him a place above the gods where no one could question him again. Then the messenger god landed hard on the cloud road, his face pale and frightened, and he finally explained why he had run through the frost in such panic. He had seen Vance inside the outer rings days earlier, speaking to the curse as if it could answer him. He had also seen the first signs of the hidden chamber opening before anyone else did, and he had fled to warn Olympus because he feared that the dragon inside was not simply a beast, but a guardian bound to the chamber by ancient sky law. That was the twist that changed the whole meaning of the night. The chamber was not sealed to hide a monster. It was sealed to keep the dragon from waking too early because its power was tied to the storms above Olympus, and if the wrong hand tried to take it, the whole cloud structure around Mount Olympus could collapse into chaos. Zeus stared at the glow and finally understood why the old wards had been built so carefully. Long ago, the gods had hidden a living key inside the chamber, and that key was the celestial dragon. It watched over the cloud rings and kept the storm road stable, but it could only stay calm while the seals remained intact. Vance had learned enough of that old truth to try and force the chamber open, believing he could command the dragon through the frost and claim the storm power for himself. But now that the chamber had begun to open on its own, even he could not predict what would happen next. The frost suddenly rushed forward in sharp blue cracks, crawling across the cloud path of Olympus toward Zeus and the others like living glass. The messenger god cried out and jumped back, his wings flashing silver as he nearly lost his footing. Zeus raised a hand and called the storm down in a clear ring of light, forcing the frost to slow, while Athena struck the cloud road with the edge of her bronze shield and shattered a line of ice before it could spread farther. Hera stepped beside Zeus and added her own power, not with lightning but with calm command, and her presence steadied the others in a way that made the whole group stronger. Hades finally moved, and when he did, shadows rolled out across the frost lines, not to hide them, but to hold them in place long enough for the others to act. For the first time in this story, the gods did not fight each other for control. They worked as one. Vance saw that and made his move. He thrust both hands toward the chamber door and tried to pull the glow toward himself, hoping to force the ancient seal apart before the gods could stop him. But the chamber answered him with a deep surge of storm light, and the hidden chamber pushed back so hard that Vance was driven several steps away, his careful smile breaking apart at last. The celestial dragon cried again from within, louder now, and the sound made the whole hall of lightning tremble. Its voice was not cruel. It was warning them, pleading with them, and the truth of that cry reached Zeus more clearly than words ever could. Zeus looked at the others, and in that instant he changed. He had entered the chamber as a ruler who thought strength meant standing alone, but now he saw that strength without trust was only pride. He gave a simple order and everyone understood it at once. Athena would hold the frost lines. Hera would keep the group steady and stop panic from spreading. Hades would bind the shadows around the chamber threshold and keep the opening from tearing wider too fast. The messenger god would carry their warnings along the storm road if the curse spread again. As for Zeus, he stepped straight toward the glowing seam of the hidden chamber, even as Vance tried to block him with a burst of cold light. Their clash was sharp and sudden, a bright hit of storm against frost, and Vance stumbled back with his robe whipped sideways by the force. He did not look cruel now, he looked desperate. He shouted that Olympus had always kept too many secrets, that the gods always chose who could know the truth, and that he was only taking what should have been open from the start. For a brief moment, Zeus almost understood that hunger. Then he saw the greed behind it, because Vance did not want freedom for Olympus. He wanted the power for himself. Zeus answered by planting both feet, lowering his hand, and speaking the oldest command of the storm. The lightning in the hall of lightning gathered above him, the chamber glow answered beneath him, and the two forces met in the air between the open door and the broken frost. The light became so bright that even the silver edges of the cloud rings outside flashed like day. Inside that blaze, the hidden chamber opened wide enough for all of them to see the shape within. The celestial dragon was immense, wrapped in star-like scales that shone with icy white and blue fire, its vast wings hidden in the storm clouds above like living thunder. It was not chained and it was not sleeping. It was wounded by the frost but not in body. It was wounded by the fear that had grown around it for too many years. The dragon lowered its head toward Zeus, and for a second the storm became quiet, as if Olympus itself held its breath. Then the dragon turned its eyes, bright as cold stars, toward Vance. The messenger god gasped because he finally understood the true shape of the danger. Vance had not made the dragon angry. He had made it afraid. He had used the curse to wake a guardian that should have been met with respect, and fear had pushed the dragon toward the chamber opening before its bonds were ready. Hera reached out and caught Zeus before he stepped too far forward, because the blast of cold wind from the chamber threatened to send him back. Athena shouted that the seal was failing again, and Hades said in his quiet voice that if the dragon fully broke free in this state, the storm roads around Olympus could twist and crack. Vance, shaken and pale, backed away from the chamber at last, but his eyes never left the glowing power within. He had not won, he had not lost either. He had simply uncovered something larger than his own plan, and that made him more dangerous than before. Zeus felt that danger clearly because the chamber now stood open, the dragon was awake, and the next choice could save Olympus, change it forever, or break it into pieces no one could repair. The storm roared over Mount Olympus, the frost kept crawling, and the gods stood at the edge of a truth that had only just begun to reveal itself. The storm above Mount Olympus grew darker, and the hall of lightning shook under each hard crash of thunder. Zeus stood at the center of the marble chamber, with bright white hair lit by flashes from the open sky, and his blue eyes fixed on the open hidden chamber beyond the golden columns. Hera stood beside him in her white and gold gown, her long black hair still and neat, while Athena held her bronze shield close with brown hair tied back and sharp gray eyes watching every shadow. Hades remained just behind them, quiet and unreadable in his shadowy cloak, and the young messenger god with light brown hair hovered near the doorway, his silver wings trembling with fear. All around them, the forbidden frost kept crawling over the stone floor in pale blue lines, and everyone understood the same terrible truth. If the frost reached the inner halls, the roads between the realms would lock shut, the gods would be trapped, and Olympus would lose the power to answer the sky, the earth, and the sea. That was why the open chamber mattered so much, and why the wakeful dragon inside it felt like both a warning and a weapon. Inside the chamber, the celestial dragon slowly lifted its enormous head through the lightning mist, and its star-like scales shone with icy white and blue light. Its body was vast, powerful, and strange, with wings hidden high inside the storm clouds above the rings of Olympus. It was beautiful in a frightening way, and every breath it took made the frost along the walls pulse harder. Vance stood near the threshold, his silver hair neat, his polished dark robe smooth, and his calm smile no longer hidden. He had served in the court for years as a quiet attendant, always bringing messages, always bowing low, and always listening more than he spoke. Now his real purpose was clear. He wanted the dragon because he believed its power could freeze the old order of Olympus and leave him standing near the top of a new one. He had not cared if the realm suffered, because in his mind, fear was the only way to make the gods obey. Zeus stepped forward and spoke with a voice that cut through the storm, demanding that Vance explain why he had opened the chamber and awakened the beast. Vance answered with a soft laugh and said that Olympus had grown weak under slow rules, old pride, and endless debate. He said the dragon and the frost could be used to force the gods into a new age, one where no ruler could simply command without being challenged. Athena saw the truth at once. Vance did not want justice, and he did not want balance. He wanted control, and he was willing to cover the whole sky in cold to get it. Hera moved first, her face calm but severe, and she ordered the messenger god to seal the outer doors before the frost spread farther. The frightened young man with light brown hair hurried away on his silver wings, nearly slipping on the crystal ice as he left. Athena then stepped beside Zeus and pointed out a detail that everyone else had missed. The frost was not only spreading from the chamber floor. It was moving in lines that matched the old sky wards carved into the cloud walls, as if the chamber had been built to hold back something much older than a beast. Hades looked at the ceiling and then at the dragon, and he said in his low voice that the creature had not simply been trapped here. It had been bound here as a guardian, and the frost was the lock that kept its power from spilling into the world. That was the first true twist, and it changed everything. The dragon was not the enemy they thought it was the prison and the prisoner at the same time. Zeus stared at Vance, and for the first time he understood the full shape of the danger. Vance had not opened the chamber by accident. He had studied the old wards, found the weak places, and used the growing tension in Olympus to hide his work. He had wanted the dragon awake because he believed the guardian power could be bent to his will if fear and cold spread far enough. But the dragon was waking with ancient memory, not blind loyalty, and that meant the whole plan could turn on him in a single moment. The celestial dragon lowered its head and looked at Zeus with eyes that glowed like frozen stars. Then, to the shock of all four gods, it spoke without words, sending meaning into their minds in a rush of cold, clear feeling. The dragon showed them flashes of the past. Long ago, before the current order of Olympus, the sky had split under a war between gods who wanted to rule by wisdom and gods who wanted to rule by force. The dragon had been born from storm and starfire to guard the line between the realms, because if one ruler ever seized all sky power, the roads of Olympus would become chains instead of paths. The forbidden frost was not a random curse. It was a control seal made by old gods who feared that even guardian power could one day be stolen. Vance had found fragments of those old records, and instead of studying them with care, he had twisted their meaning. He believed the seal was proof that the gods must be ruled by fear, because only fear could keep power in check. That belief had made him dangerous because he was not acting like a simple thief. He truly thought he was saving Olympus from weakness, even as he dragged it toward ruin. Zeus felt anger rise in his chest, but he also felt shame, because Vance had exploited a fear that Zeus had never fully faced. The ruler of Olympus had kept too many secrets, and those secrets had given a greedy man space to grow in the dark. Then the chamber changed again. The frost veins on the floor brightened, and the cloud walls groaned as the dragon pushed against its bonds. The hidden chamber trembled, and a sharp crack split along one ancient sky ward. Vance saw that he was losing control, and the calm smile finally broke. He spread his hands and tried to command the dragon with words of power he had copied from the old markings, but the creature answered only with a deeper storm. Its wings, still hidden in the clouds above, began to beat hard enough to shake loose sheets of lightning mist. The cloud path of Olympus outside the chamber also started to fracture, and pale blue frost cracks raced across its surface as the curse spread outward. If the path failed, no god would be able to move safely between the outer rings and the inner realm. Hera noticed the danger first, and she turned to Zeus with a sharp look that said they no longer had time for pride. Athena told him the answer was not to crush the dragon, because it was the only thing keeping the old wards from breaking all at once. Hades added that the underworld would not be able to swallow a storm of this size if Olympus fell apart. Even the messenger god returned, pale and shaken, and reported that the outer gates were already freezing shut. The stakes had risen again. This was no longer about one hidden chamber. This was about whether every road, every gate, and every realm linked to Olympus would remain open at all. Zeus stepped toward the dragon, and the storm around him answered his anger with a roar of blue light. But this time he did not raise his power to dominate. He remembered the dragon's warning, and he understood that old rule and new fear had both poisoned the realm. So he lowered his shoulders, stood straight, and spoke to the dragon like an equal instead of a beast. He admitted that Olympus had failed to speak honestly about the chamber and the frost. He admitted that fear had been used too long as a shield. Then he asked the dragon a simple question. What did it need in order to stop the frost without breaking the realm? The dragon responded with a pulse of light that flashed through the chamber like a silent answer. It showed Zeus a clear path. The seal could be softened, not shattered. The frost could be turned inward, back into the ward, if a ruler with true authority and an honest heart accepted the burden. That meant the lock could be changed only by someone willing to carry the cost. Athena understood before anyone else, and she moved beside Zeus without hesitation. Hera did the same, placing one hand against the storm wall to steady the chamber, while Hades used his dark cloak to shield the messenger god from the freezing wind. Vance shouted that they were fools because he still believed that any show of mercy was weakness. But Zeus no longer heard him as a threat alone. He heard him as the result of his own silence, and that made the battle more painful than any strike could have been. The final choice was not yet finished, but the turning point had already arrived. Zeus gathered the lightning in his hands and pressed it into the frost lines, not to blast them apart, but to guide them into a new shape. Athena anchored the pattern with her calm mind. Hera held the chamber steady with her unshaken will. Hades kept the hidden edges from collapsing into shadow. And the dragon, sensing trust for the first time in ages, folded its glowing wings close and released a low, thunderous breath that drove the curse backward into the old seal. The frost screamed across the floor, rose in one bright wave, and then sank deep into the chamber walls where the ancient wards could hold it again. Vance stumbled back, shocked that his careful plan had failed because the gods had chosen unity instead of fear. Yet he was not gone, and that was the final warning. As the chamber settled and the storm outside eased just enough to let a strip of pale sky show through, Zeus looked at the dragon and then at the others, knowing the truth had only opened a larger door. The dragon was awake now, the frost had a new shape, and Vance had learned enough to become more dangerous than before. Zeus stood in the fading lightning, changed by the choice he had made, because he had finally learned that true rule was not about forcing the world to obey. It was about carrying its burden without breaking its trust. But even as he understood that, deep in the ring of clouds, something else began to stir, and the next danger was already moving toward Olympus. The storm above Olympus had grown quiet in a way that felt wrong, because the clouds no longer moved with their old confidence, and the lightning no longer flashed with easy pride. In the Hall of Lightning, where marble floors gleamed under a broken sky, Zeus stood still beneath the open ceiling, and the bright white of his hair caught the fading glow of the storm. He had a tall, athletic build, glowing blue eyes, and a gold and white robe marked with lightning patterns, yet his stern face was no longer only stern. It now carried the weight of a man who had learned something costly. Nearby, Hera watched with her long black hair falling over her white and gold gown, her silver earrings shining as she kept her calm but severe gaze fixed on him. Athena stood beside her, serious and ready, with brown hair tied back, sharp gray eyes, and polished bronze armor under a dark cloak. Hades waited in the shadowed edge of the hall, quiet as ever, his dark black hair and pale face hidden beneath a long cloak that made him look distant and hard to read. They all knew the same truth now. Olympus was not only wounded by the spreading forbidden frost. It was being tested by a new kind of danger, and if they failed here, the cloud road to the inner realms could collapse, the hidden wards could break, and the realm above the world could fall into fear and confusion. Zeus had already learned that force alone could not hold a kingdom together, but learning that lesson did not make the next choice easier, because the next threat was already moving through the storm rings beyond the hall. That threat took shape in the outer clouds, where the cloud path of Olympus wound through the air like a pale road between worlds. The path was made of layered cloud and faint lightning veins, but now it was cracked by pale blue frost that crawled in sharp lines across its surface. Messenger God rushed along it with frozen feathers clinging to his small silver wings on his heels and shoulders. He was young, light brown-haired, pale blue tunic wrapped tight against the cold, and his frightened face showed how badly the news had shaken him. He had been sent to carry warnings between the realms, but the frost had made every step unsafe and every message harder to deliver. Behind him, the celestial dragon stirred inside the cloud rings, that massive storm circle of dark gray clouds with silver edges and glowing lightning veins. Its body was made of cloud and lightning energy with icy white and blue highlights, and its star-like scales flashed under the storm as if the sky itself had opened one eye. The dragon had awakened when the larger door was opened in the hidden chamber, and now it was not sleeping again. Yet the dragon did not move like a mindless beast. It seemed drawn by the frost, as if the curse was not only hurting the path but calling it. Zeus turned toward the messenger god and listened, because he no longer believed that a ruler must answer every problem by standing above it. The young god spoke through chattering teeth and said the frost was growing faster near the hidden outer ring, where the ancient wards were weakest. He also said that Vance had been there before the first crack appeared. That name changed the air in the hall, because Vance was not a warrior and not a monster, but a court attendant with silver hair, a polished dark robe marked with subtle storm patterns, and a smooth smile that always came too easily. He had seemed harmless once, but the truth had already shifted. He wanted power, and more than power, he wanted control over the storm court itself. He had seen how fear could bend people, and he had learned enough from the dragon and the frost to become more dangerous than before. He no longer needed to guess. He knew the shape of the hidden secret now, or at least enough of it to use it. Athena was the first to speak clearly, because wisdom did not wait for comfort. She said that Vance had not simply stumbled into the secret chamber. He had been drawn there by the same thing that drew the frost, and that meant the curse had rules. If they could understand those rules, they might stop the spread before it reached the inner gates of Olympus. Hera did not like the sound of that, because she understood what rules meant in a divine world. Rules meant someone had built this danger on purpose. She asked the question that everyone else feared: who would seal a dragon in the clouds, hide it behind ancient wards, and then let a frost curse spread around it? Hades lifted his eyes and answered in a low voice that made the room feel colder. He said the hidden chamber was not only a prison, it was a lock. Long ago, a secret had been buried there, because the dragon had once been used as a guardian for something far more dangerous than its own fury. The frost was not born from the dragon. It was a failing seal, a cold warning that the hidden power inside the chamber was waking up. That revelation hit Zeus harder than any thunderclap. He finally saw the shape of the real problem. This was not just a broken defense. It was a buried choice from the past, and someone had begun to pry it open. Vance had learned enough to understand that opening the larger door did not merely free the dragon. It also exposed the truth inside the chamber, a truth that could give a hungry mind a way to bend the whole storm court. He did not want to rule by honor. He wanted to rule by leverage. That made him dangerous, because a person like that would not stop at one secret once he found it useful. Before Zeus could act, the hall trembled with a hard wave of cold that rolled in from the cloud paths. A messenger burst through the golden columns with frost on his sleeves and panic in his eyes, shouting that the cloud path of Olympus was cracking near the outer ring, and that the way to the hidden chamber was no longer secure. The words sent Athena into motion at once. She ordered guards to seal the side gates, not with force but with formation, because a broken path could not be fixed by panic. Hera moved beside her, calm and severe, and used her authority to steady the attendants who had begun to whisper in fear. Hades stepped forward and opened a deep shadow at the base of the chamber wall, not to attack, but to sense the shape of the hidden chamber beneath the storm. Zeus watched all of them and understood what had changed in him. He did not rush to command. He listened first. Then he spoke with a voice that carried through the hall, clear and strong, telling every god and guard that Olympus would not be saved by one hand alone. It would be saved by trust, truth, and courage working together. That was the first real sign of his change, and it mattered because the storm itself seemed to answer him. Lightning moved along the open ceiling, not in rage, but in warning. Still, Vance had already chosen his path. From a distant ledge in the cloud rings, he watched the movement below with his calm smile, and his silver hair shone against the dark storm like a blade hidden in moonlight. He did not look afraid, he looked satisfied because the panic spreading through Olympus made his plan easier. If the gods blamed the dragon, he could hide the truth. If they blamed the frost, he could push them toward the wrong lock. And if they blamed Zeus, he could make the people doubt the new mercy their ruler had just found. Then the true twist began to rise, and it came from the hidden chamber itself. As Hades widened the shadow below the storm wall, an old ward appeared for a brief moment, glowing with ancient symbols that no one had seen in ages. Athena read the pattern first, and her face changed at once. She said the chamber had not been built to keep the dragon out. It had been built to keep something else in, something that fed on trust broken inside the storm court. The dragon had been left as the last living seal, not because it was evil, but because it could sense betrayal faster than any god could. The frost was its warning flare, a signal that the seal was failing because someone with greedy intent had been feeding on the chamber from outside. Zeus stared at the symbols and finally understood Vance's real motive. Vance had not opened the larger door by accident. He had done it because he believed the thing inside the hidden chamber could make him untouchable. He wanted the power that came from controlling fear itself, and he was willing to let Olympus crack if it gave him a crown of shadows. Zeus felt anger rise, but he did not let it rule him. He remembered the lesson he had just learned. A true ruler does not simply crush the problem. He carries the weight of the answer. So he made a hard choice. He ordered Hera to protect the hall, Athena to guard the path, and Hades to keep the shadow gate open just long enough to reveal the chamber truth. Then Zeus walked toward the outer cloud road alone, his robe bright against the dark storm, as the dragon's vast shape shifted above him and the frost lines crawled closer to his feet. The storm above Olympus deepened, the hidden chamber began to stir, and Vance stepped out from the ring of clouds with that same careful smile, ready to use the next secret before anyone else could stop him. Zeus met the coming threat with open eyes, but the danger was not finished yet, and the truth inside the chamber was only beginning to wake. The storm above Olympus rolled like a living sea, and the whole mountain seemed to hold its breath. The cloud path of Olympus stretched forward in broken layers, glowing faintly with lightning veins, while pale frost crawled across it like a silent sickness. Zeus stood at the front of that lonely road, tall and bright in his gold and white robe, his white hair whipping in the wind, his blue eyes fixed on the danger ahead. He was not just guarding a path. He was guarding the peace of the realm, and he knew that if the forbidden frost reached the inner halls, it would spread fear through every corner of the sky. Behind him, the storm rings turned above the hidden chamber, and the celestial dragon shifted inside the clouds with a vast, restless force. The dragon was not evil, but it was ancient, proud, and tied to the secret in the chamber. That secret mattered because it could either hold the skies together or tear them apart. Zeus had already seen too many signs that someone wanted to use that secret for selfish gain, and that made the whole mountain feel colder than any winter night. Vance stepped from the ring of clouds with the same careful smile he had worn since the beginning, and that smile made him seem calm only to the careless. He was a man with silver hair, a dark robe marked with storm patterns, and a smooth face that hid every selfish thought behind polite words. He had spent the entire crisis moving quietly through Olympus, asking the right questions, learning the right paths, and waiting for the moment when fear would open a door for him. What Vance wanted was simple and dangerous. He wanted the power sealed inside the hidden chamber because he believed Olympus was weak when ruled by old customs and patient warnings. He thought that if he could claim the chamber's secret, he could force the gods to obey him, and he could finally rise above the others. That greed had become his engine, and it had pushed him to study the forbidden frost as well. He had learned that the frost did not just freeze stone and cloud. It reacted to the old wards around the chamber, and every crack it made could loosen a seal that should never be broken. Vance lifted one hand and the frost answered by racing faster along the road. He did not need to speak loudly because his intent was already clear. He wanted Zeus distracted, the dragon stirred, and the chamber opened before anyone could understand the cost. Zeus moved first, sending a sharp burst of lightning across the cloud road. The light struck the frost and shattered a long strip of ice into drifting blue sparks, but the curse did not stop. It spread in fresh lines from the edges of the broken path, as if it remembered the shape of every step taken on it. Then the messenger god came rushing through the wind, a young man with light brown hair, small silver wings on his heels and shoulders, and a pale blue tunic that was already dusted with ice. His face was pale with fear, but he still forced himself forward because news mattered more than comfort in a crisis like this. He bowed quickly and said that the frost had reached the lower gates of Olympus and that Hera and Athena were on their way with the others. He also said something that made Zeus narrow his eyes. The wards around the hidden chamber were not only shaking, they were speaking. The chamber was waking because something inside it had heard the dragon, and the dragon had heard it first. That was the first real twist, and it changed the whole meaning of the danger. This was not just a leak of cold. It was a response, as if an old seal was being tested from both sides at once. Soon Hera arrived through the storm light, and her presence made the air feel steadier at once. She was a regal woman with long black hair, silver earrings, and a white and gold gown that gave her a queenly strength even while lightning flashed around her. Her calm face did not hide her concern, because she understood better than most that order could fail when pride took over. Athena came beside her, a serious woman with brown hair tied back, sharp gray eyes, and bronze armor under a dark cloak. She carried herself like a soldier and a judge at the same time, always measuring cause and effect before she acted. Hades arrived last, quiet and distant, his black hair falling against pale skin, his shadowy cloak moving like smoke in the wind. He did not waste words, but his presence carried weight because he understood hidden things better than anyone else there. Together they listened while Zeus explained the frost, the chamber, and Vance. Athena looked at the frost lines and quickly said that the curse was being guided, not just spreading on its own. Hera added that the chamber had been sealed long ago for a reason, and that the reason had been kept from most of the court to prevent panic. Hades then revealed the second twist. The hidden chamber was never built to lock away the dragon. It was built to keep the dragon close enough to watch over a source of storm power that could calm Olympus during great disorder, but only if the seal remained intact. If the seal failed, that power would not become free and safe. It would surge through the mountain without control. That truth made Vance even more dangerous because he was not chasing a simple relic. He was trying to seize the heart of Olympus itself. Vance heard enough of the truth to realize the others were no longer confused, and his polite mask slipped for one brief moment. He stepped closer, and his smile grew thinner, almost sharp. He admitted that he had not caused the frost, but he had used it, because a realm that feared change would always cling to old rulers. He believed Zeus had grown too careful and that Hera and Athena protected the past too much. He believed the chamber should belong to the one smart enough to command it. Then he reached into the mist and pulled out a slim silver key, one of the old ward keys stolen from a side hall days earlier. That key mattered because it could answer the chamber door if the seals were weakened, and Vance had been planning this move for a long time. The hidden chamber shuddered, and the dragon above gave a deep, storming cry that rolled through the cloud rings. The sound pushed everyone back, and the frost suddenly surged in a wide wave across the road. Zeus planted his feet and raised both hands. Lightning burst from his body, not wild but controlled, and it formed a bright wall that held the frost in place. Hera called for the messenger god to guide the others away from the slick edges of the path. Athena moved to the side and studied the pattern of the frost because she saw that the curse was circling toward the chamber door in a loop. Hades lowered one hand into the shadow at his feet, and a dark current spread forward to slow the frost without shattering it. The battle was not loud in the way a war was loud, but it was intense in every breath, every step, and every choice. Then the cloud ceiling above the chamber cracked open with a flash of white fire, and the celestial dragon descended into full view. Its scales glowed like stars under ice, and its enormous wings spread through the storm clouds as if they were part of the sky itself. It was terrifying but also majestic, and its eyes held ancient pain rather than hatred. Athena understood first. The dragon was not attacking Olympus. It was trying to keep the chamber shut because it remembered the disaster that had once forced the seal to be made. It had been guarding the truth for ages, and the frost was awakening that memory by force. Zeus felt that truth strike him like lightning. He had believed the dragon was a threat to be managed, but now he saw that it had been a guardian all along. The real threat was the greed that kept trying to make every old thing serve a new selfish master. Vance used the opening to sprint toward the chamber door, the silver key glowing in his hand. He nearly reached it, but Hera stepped into his path, her face calm and severe, and she told him that no throne was worth breaking the sky. Vance tried to push past her with a burst of storm force, but Athena intercepted him with a precise bronze strike that sent him sliding across the cloud path. He did not fall, but he was driven back, and for the first time his careful smile vanished completely. Zeus then turned from the dragon and the frost and gave a single command that changed the mood of the whole mountain. He ordered everyone to stop fighting the seal and start listening to the chamber. That choice came from trust, not fear, and it marked the beginning of Zeus becoming a wiser ruler. He had begun the day ready to defend power. Now he was ready to share it. The chamber answered at once. Ancient sky wards lit up in long lines of blue and gold, and a deep voice rose from within the stone, not angry, but tired. It spoke of an oath made long ago by the first guardians of Olympus. The power inside the chamber was never meant for conquest. It was a reservoir of storm balance, a living source that kept the seasons of the mountain from collapsing into chaos. But it could only stay calm while guarded by a dragon that understood both fury and restraint. The frost curse had not been created by the chamber. It had been built from fear by someone in the outer court long ago, someone who had wanted to weaken the seal and blame the dragon later. That revelation changed everything. The curse was not just spreading now because of the current crisis. It had been waiting beneath the surface for a greedy mind to wake it. Vance froze when he heard that, because he understood at last that his own hunger had made him part of a much older lie. He had not invented the disaster. He had simply become the newest hand reaching for it. Zeus saw that Vance was frightened now, not redeemed, but frightened enough to hesitate. That hesitation mattered because it gave the others a chance to close the frost loop and stabilize the road. Athena guided the pattern. Hera steadied the ward rhythm, Hades held the shadow line, the messenger god carried warning to the lower gates, and Zeus, standing at the center of storm and ice, opened his hands and let the chamber draw the wild lightning into balance. The frost on the cloud path of Olympus began to crack apart in pale blue shards, and the shards dissolved into harmless light. The dragon lowered its wings and hovered above the chamber with a heavy, watchful calm. Vance stumbled back from the doorway, not defeated forever, but denied for now. He stared at the others with a look that mixed anger, shame, and fear, because the secret he wanted was still there, and he still wanted it, but he no longer controlled the moment. Zeus did not attack him again. Instead, he told Vance that Olympus would not be saved by selfish hands, and that every hidden thing would eventually reveal the truth of the one who chased it. Vance said nothing, but his silence showed that the fight was not finished. The hidden chamber remained open, only a crack, just enough to keep the wards stable, and the voice inside grew quiet again. Hera took one long look at Zeus, and in her calm expression there was approval, but also concern for what would come next. Athena knew the enemy had lost this round, yet she also knew the old lie was bigger than Vance alone. Hades sensed the same thing in the shadow under the stone. Somewhere deeper in Olympus, someone else had helped prepare this trap long ago, and that hidden hand had not yet been named. Zeus lifted his eyes to the storm sky above the mountain, his robe still bright against the dark clouds, and he understood that the next truth would not come easily. The chamber had awakened, the dragon had spoken, and the frost had shown its roots. The war for Olympus was still moving forward, and the greatest secret of all was only beginning to step into the light. Olympus stood beneath a black storm sky, and the wind moved hard through the cloud rings. The hall of lightning still glowed behind the gods, but the frost on the cloud path kept spreading in pale blue cracks. Zeus, the tall man with bright white hair and glowing blue eyes, saw that this was no small curse. If the frost reached the inner gates, the roads between the realms would lock, and Olympus would lose its power to move, speak, and stand together. Hera stepped beside him, calm and severe in her white and gold gown, and Athena came forward in bronze armor with her brown hair tied back tight. Hades waited in the shadow line, quiet and guarded, while the frightened messenger god rushed in with frozen feathers shaking on his heels and shoulders. He told them that Vance had been seen near the hidden chamber long before the frost began. Vance had smiled at the court, listened to every fear, and used each secret to weaken trust so he could control the mountain when panic came. Zeus climbed the broken cloud path with Hera, Athena, and Hades at his side. The celestial dragon rose above them in the storm clouds, vast and bright with star-like scales, and its voice rolled through the sky like thunder made of ice. It revealed the hidden truth at last. Vance had helped seal the dragon long ago, not to protect Olympus, but to keep the dragon silent while he studied the frost curse and learned how to spread it. He wanted to make the gods afraid enough to accept his rule. The final clash came at the hidden chamber where lightning mist flashed around ancient sky wards. Vance stood there with his polished dark robe and his smooth, careful smile, but his plan was collapsing. Athena broke the ward circle, Hades cut off his escape with cold shadow, and Hera held the chamber steady with her forceful voice. Zeus faced Vance and demanded the truth, and Vance finally admitted that fear had always been his weapon. Then Zeus chose a stronger answer. He called the storm into his hands, not to destroy, but to clear the frost from the stone and break the curse at its root. The cloud roads opened again, the dragon was freed, and the hidden chamber could no longer hide the lie. Vance was driven back, the court saw his true face, and Zeus stood changed, no longer ruled by anger alone. He now led with trust, and Olympus answered him with thunder and light.